Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Pottstown. My name is Linda Kozitzky, and I will be I'll be facilitating today's Sunday service. For over 50 years, we have been a liberal religious outlet for the Pottstown community, and I'd like to welcome you all. You are welcome here no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, no matter what your background. You are welcome here to join us as we proclaim work in our spiritual journeys. You are welcome to join us as we sing songs that uplift our very beings. You are welcome to join us in community as we learn, live, and love together. All are welcome as we worship that which gives us meaning and value. No matter what you call this building, this hour, or this gathering of people, we worship as one, illuminated by the light of the chalice. So, are there any announcements?
And two, Friday, I was here with the gardener mowing company, whatever you want to call them, to get the flower beds right around the church done. Did a great job. It wasn't quite exactly what I wanted, but at the same time, it was better than what I expected. So I'll be so visit here today. We've got friends visiting. He is starting to plan the next demo. I think it's now going to be in June, but I don't know for sure since I'm trying to pin him down, and I have no idea what he's planning. So just he's working on it. I know that. So just to let you know that. Thank you.
Just to remind you that there is a toxic or a recycling event next Saturday morning at O.J. Robbins High School. You can take hazardous waste and stuff like that. So it's on the internet, but if you want any information, just come to me. You have to register, but it's free. So I'm bringing stuff.
Does that include televisions? Pardon? Does that include televisions?
I'd have to take a look. I gotta get rid of old thermometers that plastic broke, but the mercury is intact. It says hazardous waste, but you could be, otherwise, I'll tell you that there's a place that takes them out. That's my thing. I took a couple TVs and it's outside, just behind where Shady Maple is. I can tell you all that.
We've got some UUSP have things.
Normally they have a separate electronics stay where they would take electronics.
But no.
Yes.
The Goodwill, building on top 100 North by the Travis Supply, they recycle TVs and electronics. Or free.
Oh,
Oh, wow.
that's good. Well, there we go, an announcement for everyone, not just for cleaning out our storage closet. So, thank you. And my announcement is I want to thank Emily Crowes-Maurer as she is managing technology today. And Judy, I believe you are technology and training.
I am, I'm training.
There you go. We all have to learn. If anybody else has interest in helping to do technology on Sundays, please see Rick or Emily in the back, and we can get you trained up. It's a great way to get back to our community. So let us settle into worship mode. One more final announcement. Kay and John are off celebrating their grandchild's birthday in Baltimore. So we are without a piano player. We do have hymns, Bluetooth, and my phone will be what we sing along to. So just want to prepare you for that. Me and technology, this should be interesting. All right, let's settle into our Sunday worship mode. Turn off phones, settle in, pay attention to the community with which you are right now. And we will light our chalice or have a volunteer for somebody to come up and come on up. Come on down. Our chalice lighting words are by Jamie Yandel. We light this chalice to ignite the divine spark of the universe, whose pronouns have always been plural, a co-creation of brilliance and diversity, a tapestry of souls perfected. Thank you. Our opening words, excuse me, are by Elizabeth Nguyen, and this appeared in an article in the UU World, April 1st of 2024. It was summer 2023, and our yard was a small disaster. Our household is 4 adults, 2 new babies, 1 7-year-old, and a dog who could no longer see when we let him out in the yard, amongst the overgrown invasive trees unchecked for years. I did not want to ask for help again. But when the vines started climbing the walls of the house, we sent the email, Yard Day. Then came a bad air warning because of forest fires in Canada, rain from a hurricane heading up the coast, a COVID spike. I wanted to cancel, but it turns out you can't cancel needing help. So we let the people come in the rain with our masks. We yanked up roots, protected native milkweed, and disentangled vines from grapes and roses planted long ago. The yard was cared for, and so were we. As Unitarian Universalists, we put interdependence at the center of our lives. Interdependence means that we need to be loved on. Sometimes we love on others. It means that sometimes we are leaned on, and sometimes we lean on others. Some call it communal care, or just being human. It's how we show up and let others show up to express this truth. We do not go it alone, and we do not let our people go it alone. Like so many other spiritual practices, this one is a paradox too. The giving is also a gift to myself. In these acts of care, the brokenness of the world is remade on a scale I can get my heart and my calendar around. I can rail against the lack of free universal childcare and give a fellow parent a free hour right now. I can fight for freedom from all ages and give someone getting out of jail a ride right now. I can mourn the lack of accessible health care for all and get a neighbor to their appointment today. Communal care is a lot of work. Many of us feel that we can barely meet our own needs, let alone help another out. It takes connection and intention to build the relationships that allow others to let us know their needs and to be willing to share ours. It takes infrastructure, even if it's just a shared Google Doc, an email, or knowing one another's phone numbers. It takes spiritual muscle to not default to trying to go it alone, and to risk saying yes when it feels unfamiliar to lend our guest room to a stranger, or overwhelming to watch someone else's child. We in our backyard needed a lot more love, and we have a lot more love to give. We're here leaning on and being leaned on, uprooting the invasive vine of independence. So let me repeat that, uprooting that invasive vine of independence, planting interdependence, letting communal care grow. So with that, we will go to our first hymn. Our world is one world. I'm going for Story for All Ages, and I'm going to invite Brittany up. And for those who don't know, Brittany is our new teacher of our Embers class. And come on up, yay!
All right, this is called Bigger Than Me. Words rush in, big words, shadows that Luna can see but not catch. Big words with big meanings boom through the house and clang in Luna's ears. Words like pandemic, homelessness, inequality, and immigration. Zion counts the syllables over and over again, the words of a wad of gum too big to chew. Luna and Zion wonder if these words are big enough to swallow them up. Luna mounts one silently as she assembles wooden letter blocks into a wobbly stack high above her head. Zion cranes his neck all the way up, but can't see the top. Luna measures her word towers with hands held wide, but she stumbles. Zion tries to catch the falling blocks, but he fumbles. And all the big words land in an awful heap. These words are so big and they are so small, they feel as small as the teardrops on their faces. Luna and Zion stare at this tumble of blocks, letters that are no longer words, their meanings scattered in a pile of frustration at their feet. Zion taps his toe and recalls how his first big puzzle seemed like 100 pieces of nonsense until Luna helps him figure it out. Luna chomps her bubblegum and remembers the plastic jar Zion gave her to store all her chew blocks. Zion and Luna rescue an abandoned shopping cart and begin to collect this and that, every discarded thing that needs a new job. They've got big plans in mind, but their hands are smaller than their plans, and their dreams are bigger than their bodies. They can't reach everything they see or carry everything they find. Zion sees Gadget Guy, who makes the best gadgets in the neighborhood. Luna waves over to Pascal and Priscilla, the tallest kids she knows. Then Hannah and Hyun scooter past before turning around and scootering back. Daquan and Daisy look out their kitchen window and hop out to help. Then come Mark, Shimon, and Larry, and Tai Wu, and Kim Kindi. They maneuver milk crates, repurpose used paint cans, and salvage old shoe heels that had no shoe at all. Now the cart brims to overflowing, full of odds and ends, bits and pieces, and others join the brigade, a makeshift kids parade. Vijay, Wilder, Sarah, Sinque, Ahanu, and Bolade, Madeline and Catherine, Nina, Juanita and Alfred, Samar and Dante. Together they paste, tap, and tape, they loop rubber bands and tie jump ropes. So many busy hands. Big words sprout from the street, powerful words magnified by the sun. Friends hopscotch to the beat of each syllable. Elders spell words with their Scrabble tiles. They construct word skyscrapers that touch the clouds. Words so big, bigger than Luna, bigger than Zion, but not too big to grasp. Together they build and build big words that jitterbug across the sky. The words are not too heavy, big, but not too big. Because everyone is carrying them in their hearts and in their hands, Luna chants that her voice echoes like a Zion blows poodles of bubbles that drift up, 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 and form a crown atop the big words. The kids honor heroes who fill the world with words alike. With words like integrity, human rights, and conscience, they make their words into your empathy and action. They honor the brave humanitarians who fill the word with words like generosity and perseverance. They join their voices in triumph, joy, and laughter. These are big words we all need. Big words that lift our faces and puff out our chests. Words that float high above our heads. Freedom and hope. These are big words, bigger than any of us alone, but they are not too big when we all carry them together.
Thank you, Brittany. Now we can send children off to class.
Around you everywhere.
And now it's time for our offertory. We know that our financial contributions to this congregation come from sacrifice and hard work. We are so grateful for this and commit together to ensure funds we gather collectively do a greater good for ourselves and our world than they could have done alone. May we give in love. Thank you all. All right, so today's sermon is I believe it's the 7th. We started out this year in the fall, our fiscal year in the fall, with the first Sundays discussing what it means to be UU, and we've taken the new shared values that the UUA had passed. We had done each one individually, and I will have to say that as I was mapping this out, I actually did, because the first one was in October and the second one was in November. I actually did sort of have a method to my madness because I knew the election was coming up. So October was equity and November was transformation, because I knew regardless of how the election was going to play out, we needed to have those fresh in our mind and have those discussions. The rest of the schedule, however, was a little bit more loosey-goosey. It was when could Chad, who volunteered to two of them, I'm like, well, what Sundays are you available? Well, that's when those two got plugged in, right? And then I just kind of filled in the rest. But I also knew that interdependence was going to take more than one, because initially our knee-jerk reaction when we think of interdependence and we think of the great web of life, we think of how humans fit within the entire world of existence, right? So we talk about nature and all of that, right? It's where do we fit in there? But the fact that Forrest Gilmore, who's a UU Reverend, respect for the interdependent web of all existence is a glorious statement, yet we make a profound mistake when we limit it to merely an environmental ideal. It is so much more. It is our response to the great dangers of both individualism and oppression. It is our solution to the teeming conflict between the individual and the group. So what was interesting, and I do believe there is sort of a universal spirit that can sometimes guide me. And I just thought the universe played into my hand that this Sunday was to be about interdependence between humans, because after the past week that we have all just been through, how timely can it be? I couldn't have planned that. It just sort of played out that way. This past week, there were two reactions that I felt. The first was, I want to take a cyber truck and run down Elon Musk. And two, I want to take my latest financial statement and jam it down my current president's throat. Now, let me be clear, that's not a political statement. That's a fact. I felt those ways. And girls got to be able to dream, right? But the reality is it's not going to happen. And so what I really, as we discussed, because for those who are new, who've never participated in this, I'm not standing up here as an expert on interdependence. We are going to learn from each other. And so this is going to be a discussion among all of us in terms of, one, what does it mean? But more importantly, and what I really want to spend a lot of our time on is, so what do we do about it? How do we create stronger interdependent bonds? Does that make sense? Okay. Human beings are inherently social creatures. From the moment we are born, we are thrust into a world where relationships and connections with others play a central role in our development, well-being, and overall happiness. The need to belong, to feel part of a group, and to form meaningful connections is a fundamental aspect of the human experience. Early humans who formed strong bonds were more likely to survive and reproduce. Being part of a group provided protection, access to resources, and opportunities for cooperation. These evolutionary advantages have been passed down through generations, making the need for affiliation and interdependence a core aspect of psychology. Research by Baumeister and Leary support this idea, suggesting that the need to belong is a fundamental human motivation. They argue that forming and maintaining strong, stable relationships is crucial to our well-being as basic psychological needs, or physiological needs like food and water. So science research is saying that if we are interdependent, if we have the ability to rely on each other, it not only helps us physically, right, but it also helps us psychologically. So I give that to you as food for thought as I start to ask some questions, and now this is where y'all participate, right? And I don't want to be standing here going, Bueller. Thank you for getting that joke. So there's three words, right? There's independence, there's interdependence, and there's codependence, right? And I'm going to take codependence right off the table because I think unless somebody has another point of view, that's really not something that we strive for, right? We all know it's sort of bad if we are codependent, right? That means we are totally lost without the other person, right? But I first want to start out going, we as a society tend to value independent. We raise our kids to be independent, right? Does that fly in the face of interdependence? So I want to hear people's perspective on when is being independent good and when does it need to translate into interdependence? Thoughts?
Response. Hi. So I am a gardener, and one of the things that I'm doing this year is to really be more independent. To be more independent by canning food and growing things I wouldn't normally do because of the way the economy is, and I just want to make sure that I can have cheap food for my kids. And to me, that's really important. And I think I lean a little bit libertarian, so I'm yeah, independence. I want to be able to be self-sufficient. But I also really value community in that if something happens and shit hits the fan, I want to know that my neighbors are going to be there to help me. And I want to know that I have access to healthcare and clean water and all of those things. So the societal stuff that I think leads to interdependence is what I value. Yeah, I'm excited.
So may I challenge one thing you said?
Yes.
You said you are striving to be independent. You're going to can your own food. Are you not dependent on the people that make the mason jars?
Yes.
Okay. Not meant to be a trick question. It's just, we are interdependent even when we are thinking and striving to be independent. That was my only key takeaway, not to knock the fact that she's canning, and I appreciate that. If you have any leftovers. Rick.
I think really what we're talking about here is the definition of independent. I question the premise that we train our kids to be independent, because really we train our kids to be functioning members of society and self-reliant to a point which is different from a true independence.
Good. It's interesting. I had this conversation with my husband. He always accused me of being, you're just so independent, right? You're just, and I said to him, I said, I get it, because you see me, I'm just, it's not done, I'm gonna go ahead and do it. And I explained to him, Rick, what you're saying. I said, but you need to understand what's going on in here, right? I'm actually independent means I don't need anybody. I don't need anybody to do it. I said, I want somebody to do it. I want to be part of something. I would love for you to have done that. But I'm self-reliant in that if it didn't get done, I'm going to do it. And I said, I realized that from his looking at me Self-reliant and independent look exactly the same. But what he missed was, what I did not tell him, shame on me, is what's going on in here, which is no, I wanted you, I need you to do that. I would like for you to do that. So it's great, the difference between self-reliance and independence. Valerie.
I have had a similar thing. I have always been very proud of it, and then I was, like, as a teenager, I went to be an exchange student, and then after college, I went to South Korea for 2 years, and I was always super proud of that. But it has caused some conflicts in my marriage where, like, my husband's like, why do you never ask for help? And I realized that I had internalized this sense of independence, like I had so much pride in it, that I was afraid of looking dependent. Like I was afraid, because in my head, interdependence meant like that I was incapable of doing it on my own. And I don't like to seem incapable. And a while back, I don't remember when, but Emily had a service about asking for help. And she had told a story about how, or she was talking about how, asking for help, like we tend to perceive it as a burden on the person we're asking, but it's often a gift to them that we want them, that we want them around, we want their help, that this, we're giving them an opportunity to do something for us, and it makes them feel good. So I've been spending a lot of time thinking about that, talking with parents about that, and how I can get better at accepting that interdependence is not weakness.
No. In fact, what if independence, and I'm not here to say independence is not a good thing, to be able to stand on your own 2 feet, right? But when left to the extreme, what happens, right? So if somebody's totally dependent, you see things like emotional detachment, right? They don't form attachments. They isolate. I don't need anybody, right? And think about this not only human, but think about it globally. Think about it as a country, as a country, right? We don't need anybody, right? But we isolate them. Stifled growth, independence to the extreme can stifle growth. Because growth is dependent on outside influences, right? So again, if we are isolated and we're not exposed to, oh, I didn't even know you could do that. Or how did you do that, right? As a country, if we're internal, right? And all these other countries are doing things that were, oh, wow, right? It stifles our growth. And then there's fear of vulnerability. Interdependence helps, part of it is mutual support, right? We support each other. Shared decision making, right? Emotional intimacy and healthy boundaries. All right, so we've talked about sort of independence versus interdependence. No man can fulfill his requirements alone, right? Even as we said, and Monica, thank you for playing into my hands. That even in our striving for independence, we're still dependent on something else or interdependent on something else. Interdependence represents the delicate dance of mutual reliance and support within relationships. Unlike the notion of rugged independence, interdependence acknowledges the inherent interconnectedness of individuals and celebrates the strength found in collaboration. In interdependent relationships, partners embrace their vulnerabilities, share responsibilities, and draw strength from each other's unique qualities. Through open communication and genuine reciprocity, they cultivate a sense of belonging and unity while maintaining their individual identities. Interdependent people can take care of their own needs, but they also recognize that a collaborative team or partnership is greater than the sum of its parts. Anne.
Linda, when you first said the word independence, I thought of Independence Hall and how our founding fathers overthrew a tyrant. What a concept. And they were interdependent with one another, otherwise we wouldn't be here really speaking. And I saw the perfect example of independence yesterday. My sister and I went to Westchester for the hands-off demonstration. I don't know how many thousands of people were there. I was really surprised to see as many people as I did. And we were, I don't know if you're familiar with Westchester, but we were at Market and High Streets, and they had closed off High Street because there were so many people. But, you know, people were honking and all that kind of stuff as they drove by. But I just, it heartened me because people have been silent so far. And now they're speaking up and showing interdependence. So I hope we keep it up. We will do things.
Lord.
That was just a perfect segue. We were in Reading in spirit with you. 10 of us from the group of this fellowship went to the Reading hands-off gathering. And John Price estimated there were about 4,000 people there. I don't know if it was quite that many. But one of the chants we were chanting was, when we are united, we cannot be defeated. So it was interesting, you know, there was a real collectivist feeling there of solidarity and a lot of support from people, you know, driving through the intersection in Reading. Yeah, it was inspiring to have that connectedness. Yeah.
See, it is important, and interconnectedness, and I'll go back to nature. What do they say? One snowflake does nothing, but when a bunch of them get together, it causes a blizzard and can shut down, you know, a city. So there is a lot behind unity. And the other thing you triggered in my mind when you said, you know, Independence Hall and the Revolutionary War, overthrowing the tyrant, I went, oh yeah, the red coats versus the US Army and their blue coats. So I don't know, sorry. It just struck me that way. So let's just talk about generalization. We can talk about, I want to hear about the different types of interdependence that we are exposed to, right? So I can throw one out, which is familial, right? With a family, there is an interdependence within a family. And those roles evolve and change, right? So as parents, when you have newborns, there is certainly an interdependence, and maybe you might even say the child is dependent on you because they are. But as they start to grow up, right, it becomes more of an interdependent relationship. So there are familial relations that are interdependent. Any other type of relationships, and again, it can be at a human level, at a town level, at a country level, any other. Yeah, Judy.
Supply chain, the supply chain is very interdependent, and you realize that we're independent, and all of a sudden, the supply chain fell apart.
Right, economic. So it's an economic interdependence, right? Right now, with all of the tariffs that are being levied, the ones that are probably going to suffer the most are the small mom and pop local shops, right? So, you know, and I don't want to get to solutions yet, but one of the things is buy local, right? Shop local. What can we do to keep that economic interdependence alive versus it just crumbling? So, thank you, Sheila.
There are common everyday occurrences where we experience interdependence. For instance, my car had a problem of leaking, so I was dependent on my nearby garage, automotive garage, to try to find where it came from. And he was dependent for his livelihood on my bringing my car to him. So it was like, I was dependent on him, he was dependent on me. And that's one example. Another example is that I go to track, and I signed up for a trip, a cruise, and there was supposed to be a bus that would leave from track and take us to the Manhattan, new Manhattan cruise terminal. Well, because we didn't have 20 people signed up, they canceled that bus. So now, four of us who really wanted to go on the cruise had to get together and be interdependent and discuss how we were going to get there. And so I decided that I would fix my car, you know, be dependent on this service garage, fix my car, and I would take 3 people with me. And so that's like being interdependent on one another, because we were discussing how to get there. So also another interdependent thing is that I have a person who wants to be my travel roommate. So this cuts my costs down on my vacation. And I do line dancing with her, so I know her. So you know, there's a lot of examples in just regular life where we like come together and we kind of help each other out in situations back and forth. It's a back and forth thing, where it benefits both sides and everyone.
Right. And I think we can all come up with ideas in terms of how, you know, we are interdependent at our level. Let's talk about the United States, Alan.
Couple things, I think emotional interdependence can occur much more easily in smaller groups and environments. We obviously feel, most of us, a strong sense of interdependence, certainly emotional, with our families. And then our friends, and then maybe a community. When you get to the whole world, it becomes harder to feel emotionally interdependent. Certainly economically, we've gotten that way. There's a great interdependence. Related to that is, one of the things that kind of scares me is that we are so interdependent that if there was a disaster, I think it relates to what she said earlier, things could go really bad. When it was less interdependence, like the jars you made reference to, enabled the saving of vegetables. That kind of interdependence can cause a disaster if that breaks down. You know, like we're dependent on the computers. And if the electrical system goes down.
Well, like in Texas, when they lost their, Dallas lost their electric grid for a couple of days.
Right. So I just, I think that there are great difficulties with interdependence, with larger groups as opposed to smaller groups.
There are definitely more challenges. The question becomes, is it worth it or not to take on those challenges? Chad, you can say something.
Oh, I was just thinking like, about kind of the relationship between the two, interdependence and independence, and like, it's not like I wrote about this before, but 2 things I like are writing and being. And like, you can usually only do those independently. But in order to do them to the best of your ability and independently, it helps to be interdependent on a group. Like the way you become the best beekeeper, only you can do with the high bees and read it the way you want to read it. But the way you get better at reading a situation and have a better backlog of interventions is being in a group with other bee nerds who are intervening in all hundreds of different ways. So when you see something unexpected, you kind of already have a backlog. And same with writing, like if you're only sitting by yourself and you're the only person reading what you're writing, you convince yourself it's really good. But when you share with other people, you have such a better filtering drafting process. So then, as Al was speaking, it was like scaling. So as the community gets larger, it's harder to read the signals to know what the right thing to do is, especially like with our media landscape, like. It's so hard to know what's right, and it's so hard to know how to act in response to all this information. Because often we're getting way too much information, and information that we don't need to hear, and feeling like we need to act on this, but not knowing how.
Yeah.
And so a local example I thought of that is, like yesterday, the news was that Putin had bombed Zelensky's hometown. I don't know if you guys
Yeah.
did this
Yeah,
intentionally. And we're so lucky to have Irene, who can like give an accurate read of what is actually going on over there, like unfiltered. Okay, what is something I can actually do to help? And again, shameless plug for Irene, but she has a GoFundMe on her social media pages that I encourage people to contribute to, because that's one way you know, like, okay, this is something I'm functionally doing in this direction to. In an interdependent direction, you can contribute like with fidelity and feel good about.
yeah,
the
and
direction you want.
for those who don't know who Irene is, she is of Ukrainian descent, and has family over in the Ukraine. Her father is going over here, so. Give you a little bit of background for those who might be new.
But also to some of the stories she's told us
Mhm.
about interdependence. She was saying how 90% of the refugees are women and children, because the men are either defending their properties or like actively fighting. And I was like, what is that like? Are they like turning public schools into like giant housing facilities or hospitals or like? And she was like, well, the way the community is in Ukraine, like everybody's just opening their doors. And it's like, it's every house like operating together interdependently. To take in these people who are displaced, and it's just so interesting to
Yeah.
imagine in 2025. Like, how would our country respond if we were cast back in the 1940s?
And I think that leads into what Alan was saying, right? The larger we become and the more things that we are interdependent on, and those things become bigger, like the electrical grid or the internet. If those things go down, right? They're the food supply. One of those is, well, yeah, we're screwed. But that's also when in an interdependent community, as they did in Ukraine, you find ways.
Yeah.
Right? You find ways to get by, but if you're working independently, you're probably not going to be able to survive, right? So we go back to our ancestors. They learned early on, we need to be interdependent for us to survive. That's a great segue, because what I want to spend the rest of the time, I think we know what interdependence is. I think we know how we as individuals are interdependent on businesses, on our family, on other people. We are seeing globally the interdependence, right? If we want our new iPhones, we need the Ukraine and those countries that have those, those minerals and those, to go into our batteries, all of that sort of stuff. So we are interdependent. What do we do? I mean, I think we all might have right now, if you look at the news, this is what Alan was saying, right? It's coming, right? We're isolating, we need to isolate, we're too dependent or we're too interdependent on others. What can we do as you use? Because part of what that handout says is we covenant, which means we agree that what we're going to do is to create and nurture sustainable relationships of care and respect, mutuality and justice. We will work to repair harm and damaged relationships. So what I want to spend a few minutes on now is what as we as you use, if this is what we stand for, this is what we commit to, what do we do to deliver on that? What does that look like for us, right? Check.
Just to help segue from what I just said, like, I really do see that as a relationship between the two, and like finding that right group to know how to act in response to something, or how to leave, even words, topics out in life or whatever. So like with the Irene example, or some of the ways Kay has been talking about supporting local politicians, it's like when one of us or several of us find that right group that is like upholding the ideals that we have as UU. It's like about bringing it back to the group, and I feel like our group does an outstanding job of that. Finding ways that we can get involved, like with those right facilitators, and with the right groups of people who can help us be interdependent in positive ways.
Well, I think that has a lot to do, like, you have to have a strong foundation. And like knowing what that foundation is, and even if it's just individually, like your family unit, like what is your moral and ethical foundation? What is your, and I think that's why, like, going back to my gardening thing, like, I want to be a strong, self-sufficient person, so that way if shit does hit the fan, I can have the resources to help other people. So that's because I want to do that. So like for our group, like what I was saying, we have a strong moral and ethical foundation that we want to bring out to the community and support other groups, and that's how we do that. But if we weren't doing that now, practicing it now, you can't then expect to be able to do that when there's a war or whatever. Like if the Ukrainian people, I'm sure their culture is to be opening and like let people come into their house in general. Like that's probably just who they are. And then when that happened, it wasn't like, oh no, you know, we can't come and use my resources, you know, that's just part of their culture. So like, we have to practice that culture now in good times. That way, when bad times happen, it's still strong, and that's what you're gonna perpetuate into hopefully the future and make things better.
Other thoughts?
I think at a personal level, we have to leave the door open. Sometimes we put all of our eggs in one basket, thinking it's gonna bear fruit and all of our needs to be taken care of. But if we don't invest in other relationships, when that one fails, then you're left with nothing. So I think we have to kind of spread the love around, leave the door open. Friday, I was invited to an event, and I showed up, and a person that had run these several years ago was at this event. The last person I wanted to run this year, but I went, I didn't leave, I went, I participated, I left the door open. So I think even when people wrong us, it doesn't mean that there isn't hope for some kind of future relationships.
Right. I don't know your name, I'm sorry.
I'm Kes. Alan had mentioned, when communities get too large, kind of the problem there of knowing like when to apply help or what the situation is. And I think part of the solution there is when you start looking so big, focus in on what you can do locally, because when tragedy hits, it impacts locally. So the more you know your neighbors and the people around you, and you focus on that like foundational community, then the more there's some structure and trust among each other when that time comes and you need to help and reach out.
And that's sort of like in the opening words, where she was saying, yeah, we can rail against the injustice of people who are, you know, being jailed, but I can drive somebody home, right? I may not be able to fix the bigger thing, but it's really coming back and evaluating what can I do locally. Yeah. Judy.
I also think on a federal level, if you think about the interdependency of a federal system, the three branches, okay, we have to protect that the three branches are still going to exist, because if they don't, then we're creating either independence, a dictatorship, or we create codependency with all that two branches. So we have to protect against any divisiveness that will tear the third apart from the rest. Either the executive branch apart from the justice system. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yes.
Basically, they have to be interdependent. They all have to exist, and we have to protect against that by making ensuring that the Constitution continues to exist, because it could get torn apart.
And I think we're seeing right now the effects of just within Congress, right? They're supposed to work interdependently, and it's not. One of the other things that thought that I'll leave with you, and I forget where I had read it, is yes, it's important to what are the groups, right? And you know, who can we affiliate with? Part of the problem is this us versus them mentality, right? And it was more of to try to avoid that, doesn't necessarily mean it's gonna work, is focus on finding the group that you align with on ideas, principles, theories, right? Because that helps you avoid, and if you're familiar with any 12-step program, there's the term principles above personalities, right? Which is focus on the principles, not the people. And so that when the shit hits the fan and you have to open your doors, it's for everybody who needs help, because your principle is, I want to provide help to those who are in need versus, oh, you, blah, 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 blah. So just something to think about. Yeah.
I have a comment that this whole conversation is making me think of Stone Soup, which is that really great children's book, and I don't know when the last time everybody here read it was, but it's so great. I'm gonna go read that. And it's just about how, you know, the town is struggling and they have nothing and can't eat, and then one woman says, well, I have a recipe for stone soup, we can just make soup out of the stone. And then they all contribute one thing and then they have this amazing soup. So,
Yeah.
that's like what we.
Yeah, exactly.
I think with like how divided we are right now, like we would, it's like we want to convince ourselves that we're not interdependent. And then when tragedy strikes, usually we realize how like interdependent we are. So like I was thinking about the LA fires that happened recently. I like to think, I severely doubt that when those people were evacuating each other and helping each other escape, they weren't like, this house is a Trump sign. We'll let them figure it out on their own, let's go, you know what I mean, I'm sure that everybody ran and helped, anybody who was there. It also reminds me of the classic story on 9/11, where when they're exiting the building and people in the stairwells, as they're panicked and trying to escape, like get to the side to allow them to swerve people in wheelchairs down or whatever, they like literally got to the side and they're panicked, exiting. To allow people who weren't mobile to get out of the building first, it's like, sometimes I think when a tragedy happens, you know, like getting back to the Irene example, I would think that there was, if she didn't come to our congregation, I would think like, what am I supposed to do? How can I do anything that is tangible with it? But I think when you see tragedy like a pandemic or anything, you realize like, oh man, like, you know, they were fed that it's us versus that, it's two Americas, and you know, I guess some of it is true, in some people's experience, but when something goes wrong, you often see like, wow, we need each other a lot more than what we do each other.
Two things. One is, I very much like what you said about focusing on a person's principles, their values and so forth, rather than their identity. And there's a movement in many cases, particularly in Newism, that identity is a key thing. One final thing, this may be a little off the topic, but it was something I thought about before we came. We will work to repair harm and damaged relationships. Now that created some disagreement when this was being considered, and there was a number of the number of people. In fact, there was an actual amendment suggested to change that or take that out. So anyway, I'm just interested in what people think, you know, I'm promising to work to repair harm and damaged relationships. Does anybody have any idea on what harm and damaged relationships I'm promising to heal?
Lord, well, this makes me think of a concrete example from the gathering yesterday, hands-off gathering. So we were waiting for John Craig to drive around and pick us up. We were at the intersection where there's a red light, and a car stopped at the red light, rolled the window down. And said to me, why are you protesting against President Trump? And so that was really an interesting moment. We had just a few minutes, a few seconds, because the light was gonna change. And so I just said, well, we feel as though he's impacting, human rights, civil rights negatively, and we feel as though there's a, negative impact on education and science funding, something like that. And they kind of just said, okay, what about? But I mean, I could have said like an expletive. I could have taken it like really negatively.
Yeah.
And I don't know how genuine the question was. It seemed kind of genuine at the time. They really didn't understand why we were. So I guess my point is just to say, one of the things that we have a lot of divisiveness. So just treating people with which we have divisions, like me and my neighbors, treating them respectfully. And as if they truly have the genuine right to their own, whatever it is, treating them respectfully, and say what you believe in a respectful way.
Yeah. And it's interesting, because as you said, and it just triggered in my mind, when you said, well, he did something, or it's, we're protesting his blah, do you take it away from Trump and go, it's the president's policies, or it's Trump's policies that he's put in place, which is more not about him as a person, because we've all seen people get very, right? When you attack people get very, their hackles are up. But if you bring it back to, and what really are we upset about? Policies and tariffs, and that's the actions that he is taking versus the person. Even though we may in our heart feel it's the person, and that's between you and your heart. But can that help mend, or at least open the door, that when tragedy strikes, we disagree on policies, but come on in, I got some food. That makes sense? Yeah.
I'm fortunate enough to be part of a fellowship that focuses pretty heavily on service. The culture is to ask for help because we can't do things alone. And also a big part of that fellowship is to make amends as long as it wouldn't hurt the other party. So sometimes in answering the question, but what are we working to repair and damage relationships, I find myself having to ask what my part is in it and what my responsibility is in it. And sometimes I speak to somebody directly and I have to say sorry and ask how can I make it up to you. And sometimes I have to live a living event where I'm just making a daily commitment to myself to do better than I did the day before. And in that it becomes just a daily part of who I am and what I do. And I'm fostering a culture within that fellowship where it's okay to ask for help and it's expected to give help. And I can't tell you how important being in service has been to me. I've had other folks that were in service to me and they said things like, I'm getting more out of this than you are, and I thought they were just bullshitting me because like that's a nice thing. They're just being nice because I was crying. But I now am being able to give service back. I see that they were absolutely right. There's so much to be had from being in service to somebody else. That again, it's one of those like things it's 2 people or 3 people, 5, 8, 15 people, whatever, working together, but there's like another level that happens when we gather like that, that sort of makes it bigger than the sum of our parts. So I think there's just really small daily things that I can do to foster interdependence in my community, in my family of origin, and my family of choice, amongst people that I might not otherwise interact with.
Thank you.
I think it's important too to like, my husband always says, keep your side of the street clean. So it's like, even if that, like, in the grand scheme of things, like, I know that Republican or MAGA people aren't gonna understand necessarily where I'm coming from. They're not gonna meet me in the middle, but I'm gonna try my best to meet them in the middle, and I'm gonna keep my side of the street clean. I'm always gonna do my best to do what I think is right, even if they don't agree and they're never ever gonna meet me there. Because I'm leading by example for my kids and for my community and for myself. So I think that's really important. So even if you have a direct confrontation with someone, you can own up to what you did, like what she was saying, and apologize and keep your side of the street clean, and they may forgive you and they may not, and you have to be okay with that.
And I think it's also being able to focus on what it is you can change. Right? It's some things you just can't. Okay, walk away, but what can I change? What can I have impact on? Think about that. Okay, good discussion. Not sure we solved anything, but hopefully you walked away with a few things to think about over the course of the week as it relates to interdependence. In a world that glorifies individualism, it's crucial to recognize the inherent value of interdependence in fostering rich and meaningful relationships. While independence has its merits, it's within the embrace of interdependence that true connection and fulfillment are found. By cultivating a balance between autonomy and interconnectedness, individuals can navigate relationships with grace, vulnerability, and a deep appreciation for the beauty of shared experiences. In doing so, they pave the way for authentic connections that celebrate both individually and mutual support. So, in lieu of time, we will skip the hymn, even though I know you all like to sing. But in the spirit of interdependence, and we are a community, and we like to celebrate people's happiness, and we want to share and help you shoulder some sorrows or challenges. We'll now transition into joys and sorrows. So we will extinguish our chalice. Sheila, would you mind doing that? And we can all recite the words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of the truth, warm unity, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Our closing words are from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and this is an excerpt from his letter from a Birmingham jail, April 16th, 1963. And this was a letter that he wrote to his fellow clergymen as he's sitting in jail, because these clergymen had said that the actions he had taken were unwise and untimely. So again, I am cognizant of the interrelatedness of all communities and states. I cannot sit idly by in Atlanta and not be concerned about what happens in Birmingham. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. Never again can we afford to live with the narrow provincial outside agitator idea. Anyone who lives inside the United States can never be considered an outsider anywhere within its boundaries. So with that, have a great week. Coffee. Thank you all for your participation.